Welcome to Marin Poets Live. I'm Neshama Franklin. I work at the Fairfax Library and I love poetry, so it is a special pleasure for me to share this opportunity to introduce you to poets from our county in the flesh, as it were, as they read and discuss their work. Monthly tapings will be broadcast on Marin TV and then become part of a special page on our website, along with biographies of the poets and links to our collection. This is a partnership with the Marin Poetry Center. A common thread throughout the program will be discovering how living in Marin has influenced their poetry. Those of you who already know poetry will appreciate this direct transmission from the poet to the listener, you. Those who might think of poetry as esoteric or abstract will discover how it can sing when read aloud. For this program, we feature Roy Mash and Ellery Akers. And welcome, Roy.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Good. So here we are. And as we often do, a Marin poem to get us grounded.
Let's start with a poem called Mount Tamalpais. This is as Marin as it gets. This poem comes with an epigraph by another poet called David Ignatow. And the epigraph goes like this. I should be content to look at a mountain for what it is and not as a comment on my life. So here's the poem, Mount Tamalpais. Its slopes are drawn into an unmistakable frown, expressive of its disappointment with my lack of grandeur, my raggy pup tent of a life. Every day I drive by a moat on my way to work. There it is, clucking its tongue, red penciling my thoughts as they go by. Lame, lame, triple X, lame. Years from now, leaving the movie of my life, it turns to its wife to compare notes. They agree, exchanging majestic shrugs. 2 stars. Uneven pacing, miscast, no arc. Though they did like the part where I got hepatitis in Greece. Mostly for the cinematography.
So I love the way you set up your epigraph and then turned your back on it. That was great.
Exactly. It's that kind of an argument.
Yes. Now you should know that very often our Marin poems are about Mount Tam on this program. So I love it. It's like 13 ways of looking out Mount Tam, but there'll be lots more of them. And again, it shows your antic quality, which I already love so much.
Oh, great.
Let's have another poem.
Okay, so this is a poem called Doodle, and it partly arises from the idea of what I do when I write poetry, which is to try to get rid of that critic, that guy who's got me on the leash, and just sort of doodle around where you can't go wrong. So this is called Doodle. The hand begins by going off on its own, dashing across open space, veering this way and suddenly that. A pleasant careen, the brain stuck in the back seat, staring out the window, the pencil just along for the ride. Feel of the page on the side of the palm, feel of the pencil tip trailing a wake of paper. Feel of the freeway, top down, the skater's gracious embrace of air. It is as though the hand has eloped with itself, toddled off to trespass the blue rules, the white divides. A Ouija slider released from its ghost. ambling among the portentous letters and numbers and signs. Happy, just to gibberish. No one is watching. Nobody cares. If you are fool enough to leave corkscrews all over the place, or if, in the mishmash of crisscross and curlicue, something that looks like Kathy should sprout like a Roman candle out of the top of something that might be a head.
Wow. So I love that brain in the back seat. I love all the sensory imagery and some of those internal rhymes. The one with the skaters, I couldn't hang on to all three
That
words.
gracious embrace of air.
Yeah, yeah. So that's, and I'm going to fix on Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
She's important in your life.
That's right. She's my wife. She appears every now and then in my poems.
That's wonderful. And, you know, I often ask, you know, well, how do you write your poems? Where do you begin? And you just gave it to me there in the shape of a poem.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's marvelous. And by hand, I gather. No,
in terms of my writing?
Yeah, initially.
I sometimes write by hand if I'm out in a cafe. Sometimes I'll do it at the keyboard. I'm very into computers, so I can do it either way. I go both ways.
That's great. So do you have, this is also an embarrassing but important question, a day job?
I used to have a day job. I worked for Muni in San Francisco, the bus company, for 29 years.
Wow.
And I just retired at the beginning of this year, 2013.
Mazel tov.
And in fact, the next poem I was going to read deals with retirement.
Let's not wait a minute.
Right. So this poem is actually pre-retirement. It's called Desire for Retirement. There are not too many poems about retirement. You get a lot of wedding poems and birth poems and funeral poems. There's not that many people I found that actually write about this milestone in life. So here it is, Desire for Retirement. Sometimes I envy my bed, how it gets to bask all day with a dog. The pair of them loafing on the quiet raft of the afternoon, lulled in the lapping of the clock, the still life still on the wall, linens adrift on the shelf, the whole house awash with cushiness. What is the work of the bed but to bask all day with a dog? What is the work of the dog but to quiver his ear at the phone? Somewhere is a midday world of penny loafers and bargain matinees, saunas and marinas and 10-speeds and laptops and strudel cafes. Bored? Me? Not. My plans to saw off one day from the next, to produce my quota of carbon dioxide, to throw myself into the job of dabbing up the seeds that have fallen from an everything bagel. Though, to be truthful, I may delegate this to my little finger, to join the road gang of sleepers in, pay my dues to local 6 of the lookers out of windows, bow to the whims of my new boss, the TV guide, take on the grunt work of doing zip. Then, every afternoon at 4, following my meeting with the committee of clouds, to return, exhausted from a long day of breathing in and out, to the bed and the dog, and tilt the glider of my nose ever so slightly down. The descent so easeful, so gradual. I won't even know when I'm on the ground.
That is so utterly your experience. Ahead of time, you could crawl into it and curl up when you were on the job. Now, you did write poetry during those 29 years, I presume. Kind of, did you?
Not that much, to tell you the truth. Yeah, I had a 30-year gap in my writing career.
Oh.
I wrote when I was in college, and then afterward to about 26. And then it was like another 30 years before I took it up again.
This is very inspirational. So anyone watching,
Oh,
don't
that's
lose
right.
hope.
And I found that actually in talking to other people that write, that's not unusual.
Yes.
I was surprised that people kind of go away from it and come back.
Yes. But you've never been away from it, obviously, because all the rhythms of the language and the imagery have been working inside you to be able to produce those lapidary lines, if I blush. I mean, they're really great.
Oh,
they're
thanks
lovely.
so much.
So, another poem, please.
This is a sonnet. It's called Anti-Obad. And Obad, you should know, is a poem about lovers leaving early in the morning, pre-dawn. And it's usually about young lovers. And the mood is kind of a little remorseful. So this is a poem for middle-aged lovers. That's why it's an anti-Obad. They get to sleep in. Anti-Obad. We sleep all morning and do not dream. The sheets hold gently the filtered light. Walls nod, standing. On the screen of our minds, nothing is showing but white on white. In the middle of a room, in the middle of a house, in the middle of our lives, the alarm is off. The day is ours to laze and doze and have each other's halves. Facing outward, our bodies just touching, we make a flesh-blot butterfly, saddle without rider or horse, breathing so calm, we might almost be dead, done with desires, but for the imperceptible nudging, the sweet, lingering kiss of our behind.
That is just beautiful and a wonderful way to end, I blush to say. A flesh blot. I heard it right? Kind of Rorschach?
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
In fact, the poem was originally called Rorschach.
Okay, it's lovely to meet you, to rest into your new life. Thank you so much, Roy
Thank you
Mash.
for having me. It's been great.
Okay. Welcome, Ellery Akers.
Thanks, Neshama. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I have to ask about your name. I mean, it sounds like a soap opera, Ellery Akers, but where did it come from?
Well, it's a family name, but it actually means alder tree, which I like because I write about nature a lot. So
Beautiful. Well, with that, let's have a poem.
this is a poem about a word, and the word is please, and it's called The Word That Is a Prayer. One thing you know when you say it. All over the earth, people are saying it with you. A child blurting it out as the seizures take her. A woman reciting it on a cot in a hospital. What if you take a cab through the Tenderloin? At a street light, a man in a wool cap, yarn unraveling across his face, knocks at the window. He says, please. By the time you hear what he's saying, the light changes, the cab pulls away, and you don't go back, though you know someone just prayed to you the way you pray. Please, a word so short it could get lost in the air as it floats up to God like the feather it is, knocking and knocking, and finally falling back to earth as rain, as pellets of ice, soaking a black branch, collecting in drains, leaching into the ground, and you walk in that weather every day.
So that's, I must say, I have favorites among poems, and I love ones that start with something very modest and then embrace multitudes. And I certainly heard that, is it the mustard seed or of faith, and the feather on the breath of God, and all those wonderful resonances in a very simple work. So what a carpet you have laid out for us to walk on. But now I know you have, for at least our time, a big one. So give us the big one.
Yes, this is a poem. When I was a kid, my grandmother would say, whenever I brought anything from outside, because I always loved nature, she'd say, well, that's really nice, that little twig, but you don't know where it's been. So I wanted to write a poem about something you never know where it's been, and that is the air that we breathe. So this is called Breathing. I love to feel as if I'm just another body, a breather along with the others, blackbirds taking sips of air, garter snakes lapping it up with their split tongues, and all those plants that open and close and throw up streamers of oxygen. Maybe that cottonwood that tilts across the creek bed is the very one that just sucked up carbon dioxide and let me breathe. Maybe I should hang a card around it. Thank you for the next 2 minutes of my life. Maybe some of the air I just swallowed used to be inside the hot larynx of a fox or the bill of an ash-throated flycatcher. Maybe it just coursed past the scales of a lizard, a bluebelly, as he wrapped himself around his mate. Maybe he took an extra breath and let it out, and that's the one I got. Maybe all of us are standing side by side on the earth, our chests moving up and down, every single one of us opening a window, loosening a belt, unzipping a pair of pants to let our bellies swell. While in the pond, a water beetle clips a bubble of air to its shell and comes back up for another. You want sanitary? Go to some other planet. I'm breathing the same air as the drunk southerner, the one who rolls cigarettes with stained yellow thumbs on the bench in the train station. I'm breathing the same air as the Siamese twins at the circus, their heads talking to each other, quarreling about what they want to do with their one pair of hands and their one heart. Tires have run over this air. It's passed right over the stiff hair of jackrabbits and roadkill, drifted through clouds of algae and cumulus, passed through airplane propellers, jet props, blades of helicopters, through spiderlings that balloon over the Tetons, through sudden masses of smoke and sulfur, the bleared Buick filled with smoke from the lucky strikes my mother lit one after another. Though as a child, I tried my best not to breathe. I wanted to take only the faintest sips, just enough to keep the sponges inside, all the lung sacs rising and falling. I have never noticed it enough, this colorless stuff I can't see, circulated by fans, pumped into tires, sullenly exploding into bubbles of marsh gas, while the man on the gurney drags in and out of his lungs until it leaves his corpse and floats past doorknobs and gets trapped in an ice cube dropped into a glass. After all, we're just hanging out here in our sneakers or hooves or talons, gripping a branch or thudding against the sidewalk as I hold onto my lover and both of us breathe in the smell of wire screens on the windows and the odor of buckeye. This isn't to say I haven't had trouble breathing. I have. Sometimes I have to pull the car over and roll down the window and take in air. I have to remember I'm an animal. I have to breathe with the other breathers. Even the stars breathe. Even the soil. Even the sun is breathing up there. All that helium and oxygen, all those gases blowing and shredding into the solar wind.
I love how you invited the less charming of us there. And I love how you brought family into it too. And I will never breathe the same way, I must say. What a panoply of images. That's just a beautiful poem. So you mentioned Gerald Manley Hopkins, and I certainly heard him in there with all that wordplay, that dappled wordplay. And I heard Whitman, and I heard Rex, no, tell me again.
Rex Roth.
Rex Roth, yeah, I mean, yes, Rex Roth, who is just such a great, noisy blusterer of a thoughtful poet. That's the way I thought of him. So these were some of your influences. Where did you come across these poets? At what time in your life?
Well, I was lucky enough to go to San Francisco State and work with Kathleen Fraser, and I also worked with William Stafford, and he was a great poet. He taught me something so important about poetry. He said, lower your standards. And writing, inspiration doesn't lead to writing, writing leads to inspiration. And so he helped me, lower my standards and write a lot.
Oh, that's great. And so that's why your poetry doesn't sound high-flown at all. So did you, so have you been a card-carrying poet for a long time?
Yes, I started writing when I was a kid, and my grandmother would recite poetry at the drop of a hat. And so I grew up at being normal. It was in the air, and so I really never stopped.
That's great. You went to school, you studied literature, and that kind of stuff. Have you done other things that are synergistic with poetry?
Well, I'm also a visual artist, and so I love working outside, both as a writer and an artist, and I teach poetry workshops, and I learn from my students, so it's a wonderful thing to do.
Right, private?
Yeah,
privately you do this?
Private workshops.
That's great. So it's all of a piece.
Yes.
So we have about 4 minutes. So give us 4 minutes worth. How's that?
Yeah, okay. This is a poem I wrote in Marin in the hills after the Inverness fire 6 years later, in the same spot that these hills had been burnt, scorched, and black. And I was hiking, and I found these hills had turned amazingly green. I was so optimistic. I just started writing about healing and thinking how easy it is. Everything can regenerate. I was just really uplifted. I went back to my car. There was a truck parked next to my car with a hay bale, and there was a green sprout growing out of the dead hay. I was even more optimistic. I thought everything can be healed. I was thinking wars will end, peace is possible. And as I was writing, something happened to me that happens, I think, to all poets. The opposite truth came forward, and I realized actually many things can be healed. Some things can never be healed, and they simply have to be mourned for. And I think poetry lives often in this force field of the opposites, and the poem is right in the center of two opposite truths. So this poem is called Hook. 1 year, a general packs the dead arithmetic in a drawer. All the subtractions, divisions. The next year, vines cover the bunkers. The brain resumes its starbursts of rehearsal. The heart leaps under the defibrillator. The bone eases into its socket. Skin grows.